spend any time introducing myself, but I will thank our friends at Data Networks for helping us to arrange for this. So Dwayne, can you go ahead and join in?
All right, thank you, Alicia. And I'd like to thank Ames from Data Networks and Lightspeed for giving this opportunity in a very timely manner to present to your community on this game-changing, really very relevant to what's happening today solution. Again, my name is Dwayne McKenzie. I am a solutions architect for infrastructure and security at Data Networks. Presenting with me today is my friend Brett from Lightspeed Systems. We've worked for a long time, so Brett Baldwin will actually dive into the demo. And I'm just going to do some quick intro slides to tell you a little bit about who we are. If you're not familiar with Data Networks, we've been serving K-12 with managed services and IT solutions for over 35 years. We are right in Maryland, we're headquartered just outside of Baltimore in Hunt Valley. Lightspeed is a security solution tailored to the K-12 market that currently protects 20 million students. Their solutions are content filtering, device protection, monitoring, management, and analytics, as well as, well, I'll let Brett show you what all the rest of the stuff I can do. It is a total solution. We have worked with Ames members. Most recently, we did deploy Lightspeed at Cristo Rey Jesuit High School, and they are very happy with that solution. So obviously, what we're concerned with right now, cyber attacks against K-12, as well as the the shift, to put it lightly, that started in March, where we had to learn a new way to teach the kids. And while we are worried about all of these incidents, one of the other things we need to be aware of is the Child Internet Protection Act, which literally requires us to provide data privacy and security for students. So with the switch to remote learning and then going back to school and then putting in hybrid solutions for learning where sometimes the kids are in school and sometimes they're not, that change has been swift and dramatic. It happened pretty much overnight. I'm actually in Pennsylvania, and it was almost overnight up here too. It's not really been very easy with making this switch, and we do have significant questions around how do we properly protect the students, their data, and really their privacy while we're putting devices in their hands and letting them not only use them at school, but then they're taking them home. And then of course, once those devices get home, we need to maintain the same level of security. We need to be able to manage that. And of course, we need to be able to get information into the parents' hands to let them know what the students are doing. And with that, that was my quick introduction. Did I make it under 5 minutes? I believe I did. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Brett, if you can take over.
Dwayne, happily. Team, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really are grateful for the opportunity to share the solution with the team and looking forward to discussing a little bit about what Lightspeed can provide. I think Dwayne and the team really hit the nail on the head, and it's a unique year. I was in the school system for quite a few years before going to a reseller and then over to the manufacturer side. And just talking to a lot of my friends, I can assure you that it's become very evident that this year is unique, and a lot of challenges that nobody was expecting nor ready for. And a big part of that is, I think the initial phase was how do we get devices in kids' hands? All of a sudden they have to be remote and they have to do digital learning remotely. And so we gave out all of these devices with CARES Act funds. And then the second piece was how did we really bridge that digital divide? And so we started using MiFi hotspots and various other forms of connectivity to make sure that students had access to the curriculum and digital content. However, kind of what we're seeing now, and I'm sure a lot of you are going through, is the last piece of that question is, okay, the devices are up and running and they're connected to the network as necessary. How in the world do we make this all work? How do we gather data to ensure that we're doing the right things and that students are learning? And more importantly, how do we simplify this whole process? And kind of going back to what Dwayne was mentioning earlier, That involves cybersecurity, student data privacy, SIPA compliance. And so I'm really excited to share with you the Lightspeed product, how we've managed to align with districts to help them get through some of the challenges that they're facing today. And I'll go ahead and kind of start with, and you can probably all see that I've got a diagram up here on the screen. This is kind of traditionally how filtering has worked in the past. Now, whether the web filter itself sat in the cloud or sat on the edge of your network, it was typically analyzing traffic on the way in and the way out. And then, of course, as you introduced SSL to that, it made it a little bit more challenging because now there had to be certificates involved. You had to decrypt all the traffic to get the visibility you want. There's a lot involved in this. And so about 4 years ago, actually it's about 5 years ago, we started investing heavily in how do we take the complexity of filtering out of the equation for our school districts and give them the opportunity to manage something that's very easy to get out, gives the user the same experience on campus, off campus, and more importantly, gives you as IT administrators the data that you really need to make smart decisions. And so the first thing we've done is everything you see here in the middle, the web filter, the certificates, all of those pieces we've taken out with our proprietary agent. And the agent and extensions allow you to actually filter on that device. It actually does the decryption services of those sessions before they leave that device. And why that's really important, we'll get into that shortly, is purely for visibility and simplicity on your side. I've had districts where we literally pushed this out through the G Suite and they were running within 15 minutes. Even on Windows environments, I've had us up within a half an hour to an hour. It really simplifies in a time where it's hard to get devices back into your environment. So what I was hoping is we can jump through the interface. I really thought this would be a great place for us to start and spend some time. So I'm in the Relay interface, and kind of like I was talking about, some of the feedback we've gotten as we've had discussions with districts, both at the IT level and at the administrative level, is how do we take all of the data consumption for our students, our educators, and everything as a school system? How do we actually take that and give visibility into it? That seems to be the biggest question right now. I think we know that the students have devices, we know they have internet connectivity, but are they using it for educational purposes? Are there areas where we maybe need to be a little bit more lenient on our policies? Our poor teachers are doing everything that they can to be successful in educating in this moment. So how do we get them the tools that they need? And a big part of that starts with reporting. And so I want to walk through reporting. You'll notice that the reporting is very different than you're probably used to in most content filtering solutions. Most of them are going to have very big linear lists of reports. Now, of course, we still do have those, but more importantly, I want to talk about this reporting engine because this is really important. So one of the hot topics right now during COVID seems to be YouTube and access to YouTube. Schools that I've worked with that did not allow access 6 months ago are 100% engaged with YouTube because educators need access to that type of digital curriculum. And so let's say that you came in here and you wanted to investigate how YouTube is being used in your environment. If I click on YouTube, I'm very quickly going to get a presentation and a graph here that'll show us how and when is YouTube being utilized by our students and our educators. Of course, what videos are they accessing? This is really, really important because you can really start to delineate, are they using YouTube for educational purposes? Are they using YouTube for personal purposes? How is that tool being utilized? And let's say that there's something of question in here. I can, of course, click on any of these videos, and now I can do a detailed report on that video. I can actually watch the video directly from this report, have the ability to block or allow this video, and that actually blocks or allows that video in youtube.com. So your educators can still make curriculum, still prepare the class. They don't have to send them to some third-party splash page. This is all actually through header instructions with YouTube. But then giving you the detail of who are those visitors, when was it visited, how often was it visited, and of course, you don't have to just do this at the district level. You can take this and aggregate this through your entire tree to any group or OU you have. But kind of coming back to that visibility conversation, it becomes critically important. Now, you'll notice these tiles out of the box match the different categories that we have within the solution. Keep in mind that you can create customized tiles as well. A lot of my schools, especially in remote learning right now, are buying third-party content providers to try to help their educators get curriculum to their students. And of course, you may want to track that. So you could actually create your own tile in here. I'll use the education tile as an example. Maybe we want to understand how much are they using it, who's using it, What are my top groups? And of course, once again, you can drill down through this type of information. But really coming back to that visibility piece, the demand that we're seeing, not just from the IT teams, but from administration on needing this information is growing. Another place we're seeing this information become extremely valuable is with the boards. A lot of these boards, now that you're spending so much money on devices and connectivity and various other things, they're looking for ways to get data back that this is being used for educational content. And being K-12 specific and being very fortunate to be the market leader in K-12, we actually invested a lot of time in what we call our online activity report. And this was actually built specifically for remote learning from input from our educational institutions. And the idea behind this is this report was built to answer some of the biggest questions that school districts are trying to face during remote learning. And those are around, are they using these devices for educational content? So you can actually see, we'll actually show you educational content against other activity. We'll show you when they're using their device over the course of the day. Inactive users, who is actually in session and actually attending the classes versus who isn't. Who are our lowest educational consumption users? This is very, very important. You know, maybe if we see Casey's only consuming 10% of educational content, we probably need to have a conversation. Now, if you have students in a traditional classroom environment, you probably don't need this report as much because you're there in person. These are some of the challenges and why data is becoming so important during these COVID times. And, you know, let's say that maybe we need to dig into Casey a little bit and understand specifically what Casey's been up to. We can see in here that will actually take us to a user report. I can actually see how Casey's using the internet personally for that user. Of course, I could dig down into that again as an IT administrator or even as a counselor or a principal. I actually have the ability to really see what Casey's up to. So Casey in here, while I can see that educational content's still pretty high, there's some search, some YouTube. I'm really not too concerned. Now, if we got in here with Casey and 30% of this was going to Tinder to find a date for a Friday night, another 20% trying to go to VPNs even though they're blocked in the environment, it's probably a very different conversation. Traditional content filters have a very hard time giving this level of data because you don't have the ability to quickly glance, understand when Casey comes in the office and says, I did not click on that website, you have a very good idea of was this that it accidentally did pop up or is this an ongoing behavioral issue that needs to be addressed? So kind of talking to a couple favorite things, you can share these reports. This is really nice. So let's say I did want to provide this report to a counselor. I can actually put in the parameters on that report, send that hot link to them, and they can actually go into that report with the parameters I set on that student and actually do their own investigation. So kind of as we did before, if they did want to drill down into specifically what did Casey go to, they have the flexibility needed to do those types of things. Now, another piece to this that we've seen a lot about in the COVID world is parents wanting to understand, now that you're handing my student a device, what are they doing with that device? And so we created the parent portal. And the idea with the parent portal is, as a parent, I can actually log into the portal. I can see specifically what my student has been doing in browsing. And more importantly, and I think one of my favorite pieces is they actually have given the parents the ability to pause web browsing on their devices. This is actually being used quite a bit by our parents. The reason we see this being used, and I'll use this as a great example, I don't want my student to be using that device after 10 o'clock at night. A parent now has the ability to turn that device's internet access off at night, make sure that student gets a good night's sleep and is prepped for the next day of school. This is an optional piece. It is included with the purchase of the content filter, but just know when I say optional, it means that you have the option to whether you want to turn that on or whether you want to keep that off. So kind of going back into the content filter, I'll talk about a couple other things, and Dwayne brought these up earlier in the conversation, is talking about the default rules. So I always get questions about why Lightspeed? Why would I make the switch from our current provider to Lightspeed? And there's three primary reasons I see people make the switch. The first one we already talked about, and that was the technology itself. The fact that that proprietary technology actually looks at and analyzes the traffic on that device means you don't have to have the concern of, is this being filtered? Is this not being filtered? Whether it's on campus or off campus, it's the exact same user experience. It's the exact same reporting for you and your teams, and you can ensure that they're meeting all the requirements of SIPA. The second is the reporting, which we covered a minute ago. A lot of my schools are getting kind of tired of the linear list that they're having to drop into CSVs or pivot tables and manage and get to a meaningful state where they can actually make decisions. You actually have a reporting engine that's going to help you with all of that process. The third reason, and what we're going to get into now, is the database itself. Having done this for over 20 years, I can tell you that it's the most robust database by far in the content filtering world. Now, why is that important to you, and why would that matter? It's everything in an IT team when they don't have to constantly be updating sites and whether they're allowed or whether they're blocked. And Dwayne kind of went into something that's really important, and I'll get to this pretty quickly, is unknown URLs is another big concern. A lot of filters out there, if your website is not in their database, they actually allow it. That's a big problem right now. I'm sure a lot of you are seeing in the newspapers where school districts are getting attacked with ransomware or various other types of security threats. I always tell our schools that the best way you can handle threats like that, have a great firewall, have a great antivirus, and have a great content filter. Those trifectas will really help your district or school not have to deal with those types of issues. So kind of going to the database, let's talk about this briefly. Some kind of high level things, of course, integration with any search engine that allows us to provide header instructions, the ability for you, of course, to restrict access to your Google domain. This is really important and something I see used a lot by our districts and schools. Let's say that you're providing Gmail accounts for your students. You can actually allow them access to the school Gmail because that's a part of the Google domain, but not allow them into their personal Gmail. You can get extremely flexible. And as we go through these, I want to kind of talk through the fact that there's 135 different categories in here. Now, I get asked all the time, why does that matter to me as a school, and why does that make a difference? Going back to our original conversation about you having to play the net nanny, if you will, probably a lot of you heard that term, of what's allowed and what's blocked, you know that it's actually already categorized the way you need, and you end up only blocking, 1 or 2 sites a week, as opposed to where I've seen a lot of schools where we get into their allowed and block lists, and there's tens of thousands of sites that they've recategorized. Some examples of this, and I'll use this one, educational art. I had a school district that moved to Lightspeed this year. The reason they moved to Lightspeed, they ended up in the newspaper. A teacher was teaching on art history. That art history website had nude photography as art. Students realized that very, very rapidly. Of course, all grabbed their cell phone, snapped pictures, and started texting it around the community. That got to parents very, very quickly, got to the newspaper, and became a very, very big political nightmare for them locally. And so kind of going on why I want to talk about that, most of your filters that you're going to look at are just going to have a category for arts. One of the things that Lightspeed has done a very good job of is we've actually separated educational art from adult art, which is also different than educational sex and is also different than pornographic content. Those are 4 different categories. That's important because you, when you're managing the solution, should be able to go in and hit on and off on the categories that you want and know that your district is running in a meaningful way. Now, the second piece of that is really that video content we were kind of talking about, and this is really, really important. One of the things that we've done is, and this is proprietary to Lightspeed, instead of just integrating with Google, which we can, forcing restricted mode on YouTube, feedback we're getting from our schools is that's not enough. Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball video is the greatest example I have of this. For those of you that haven't seen that, Miley Cyrus is swinging from a wrecking ball in the nude. Of course, you don't see anything. It's perceived nudity, but it's a huge distraction in the classroom. Because that was a music video, Google allows that through their restricted mode. And so a lot of our schools were going to strict restricted mode. And when they went there, their teachers now were very upset because they were not able to get to the content that they needed to be successful in their classes. And so we were asked to do something. And we're the only provider I know today in the filtering world to have a solution like this. We call it Smart Play. And the idea behind the solution is instead of looking at YouTube as a whole, as a filtering company, we're actually analyzing the individual videos. We do this through a couple of different methods, of course, using AI and crawling, but we also do have a team of physical people that sit in a room looking at videos all day long to classify them. And the idea here is that you can have a truly educational YouTube experience, trust that your students are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and guarantee your educators that they're not going to have to deal with the laughing in the back of the classroom, the disruption to the lesson plan, and those various other things that there's a lot of frustration around. Now you get full control. You can allow channels, videos, playlists, as well as decide if you want to give your educators the ability to override those. So a lot of flexibility that you have around some of these functionalities. And so that kind of tips off the high level of filtering. I didn't want to get too granular. For those of you that do want more details, please do reach out to the Data Networks team. We'll make sure one-on-one we have a conversation to make sure we align with the needs or challenges that you're facing today. But one of the other solutions we really wanted to talk about is called analytics. And kind of going back to the visibility conversation, there are tons of demands right now for visibility. I'm tremendously surprised when boards ask for data, how hard it is to produce data on what's truly happening off campus with devices. And so on the filtering side, we can provide all the reporting around content that's being consumed. But pushback we started to get was we really need visibility into applications as well. And there's a lot of vendors out there that are doing application analysis for school districts. But the interesting thing and the problem all of our schools were facing was that they only tracked the applications that were either on a single sign-on portal or that had API access that allowed them to integrate into that software. As you can imagine, most of the software publishers didn't want that API because they're afraid that you're going to realize you're only using 100 licenses instead of 1,000 and go right-size that licensing. And so the feedback was, I really want to see not only the centrally deployed applications, those are great, but with the situation under remote learning and COVID right now, our educators are scrambling to do whatever it takes to be successful. And that may mean they download free software. That may mean that they're paying for software out of their own pockets and various other things. And so we built out what's called App Analytics. And what's different about this product than others in the market is not only do we see those centrally deployed applications, but we can also detect rogue applications because of the way we sit on that device. It uses the exact same agent and extension that you would use for the content filter. And the idea behind this is that you can truly dig into what's happening in your environment with your applications. And I'll go through kind of a brief walkthrough of how that would look. So we talked about we identify applications. So the first thing that you would see is you would go in here to the report of identified applications. Typically, when a school turns this on and trials this with Lightspeed, I see this every time. This is how the conversation usually starts. Well, let's go in and let's look at the detected applications, and we start scrolling through this. And inevitably, the team goes, stop. And then they actually end up back channeling, going, did you have any idea this was on our network? No, I didn't. Did you have any idea this was on our network? Absolutely not. I actually even had a school district recently where we found out that they had changed providers on their video conferencing. However, their educators were actually using the old video conferencing software still, even though it wasn't licensed. It's really impressive, the information that you get from here. But then based on that, you get the decision of what do I want to track and what do I not want to track. So you can come in here. Once you start tracking it, it'll bring it into the dashboard. It's going to show us the annual cost of that software, how many sessions were involved in that software, how our distribution of costs on that software has been distributed across the district based on those softwares. And kind of going back to that conversation, I'm hearing this from every school we're talking to right now. We're really excited and grateful for all the CARES Act money because it's allowed us to get devices in students' hands. However, we're not sure how we're going to accommodate year 2, 3, and 4 of operating expenditures for these devices. This is a very great solution for you to dig in and find out where your spend is, those that are being used, those that aren't being used. And I usually like to get into this app usage quadrant down here. You'll notice it's X-axis is adoption, Y-axis is engagement, but it truly gives you a picture of what are our high adoption, high engagement apps. That would be this upper right-hand quadrant. Any application that falls in there, when that renewal hits your desk, sign it, renew it, keep it. It's being used. Your educators love it. If it's here in the bottom right-hand quadrant, I typically find these are things like grade books. It's things that they're logging into, but they're not spending very much time on when they're in them. These are still really good and important software packages for your school district. Now, the left hand is where you're going to really start digging in, and this becomes very, very important. Anything that's high engagement but low adoption, you want to spend time discussing that application. That means that the teachers that are actually using that application are finding tremendous value in it and spending a lot of time in that application. This may be something that you and your teams want to talk about getting more of a presence in with your other educators, or maybe having those educators that are using it share with their peers what they're doing with it. or this may be an application that, quite frankly, you didn't know was being used on the network, but those that are using it a lot, and it actually is competing with something that you're paying for centrally as a district. Do we want to replace it with this application? And then your lower left-hand quadrant. I kind of call these your duds. You really want to evaluate these, but it means there's low engagement, low adoption. And we're finding schools are saving tremendous amount of money using this solution. Quite often it's paying for itself and then some, and freeing up, kind of like we're talking about, a lot of those operating expenditures, which schools are seeing are inflating drastically with the increase of all of these devices. And it's really time to get ahead of year 2 and year 3. So kind of more importantly, let's say I want to drill down into an app. Here you can see I've grabbed Achieve 3000. I can actually see when it's being used. I can, of course, see details on the software licensing. And then, of course, I can see the groups that are using that solution. You have the ability to drill down into these groups. So one of the things you'll really notice in here is not only are we going to give you that top level group, but we're going to give you the ability to now drill down into those individual groups, see, who are my top users inside of those groups, who are my top groups if you have nested groups inside of those groups. Of course, as detailed as you want to get on that data to understand how those applications are being utilized. Now, something that's coming down the pipe quite rapidly, it's not in all states yet, but legislation is pushing hard, and that is for schools to ensure student data privacy. I think all of us understand the liability exposure with applications and student data. All of us have gone through those legal documents and EULAs and all these other various things to make sure that we're compliant. But feedback we got from our schools, we don't have time to vet all these applications. And in addition to that, when we actually found out what's on our network, we realized we have some software on there we are not confident has been vetted for student data privacy. Now, those states that have mandates are actually requiring a solution like this, or for the IT administration to do their own vetting, and it's time consuming. And so what we've done inside the solution is you actually can vet these software applications for student data privacy. Of course, here to the right, you can see they'll get a scoring for data retention, information usage, privacy policy, data security. We'll also show you any certification or pledges that they hold. And if you want to drill down into that, I grabbed Adobe Creative Cloud. So why does Adobe Creative Cloud have one red dot? This is because they do not address COPA requirements of parent consent, and they also do not address data retention for the student data after you cancel your subscription. Now, that's not a deal killer in most cases. Most schools would probably keep this, but it's something that really needed to be flagged. Now, if you got in here and data security was a major flag, probably something you need to dig into as an IT team very, very rapidly to find out, do we want this on our devices? Is this something we should have in the network? And is this a concern to us? And this is becoming so relevant right now in the time of COVID where, like I said, these poor educators, and I feel for them. My mother is a retired educator, and we had the conversation last week about her friends and how they're teaching right now. And a lot of them feel like they just have zero control over what's happening. And so they're grabbing any resource that they can grab to try to put it on a device and try to get through their lesson plans. And so really for you to have that visibility, be able to make smart decisions on your network and ensure that not only are students safe, but that their data is safe becomes more and more important. Now, of course, you can always analyze your application. So let's say maybe there's 3 competing applications in our environment. You can actually create a graph where you come in here and actually compare applications against each other to make a decision. Once again, kind of coming back to the data picture, you now have real world data. When you go to the board or you go to your administration and say, we need to make this decision internally, you have data to drive that decision around what's successful, what's not successful, what's working, something we purchased, do we need to downsize and right-size that license? Do we need to keep it at all? Do we want to replace it with another application? Do we have student data privacy issues? I will use another school as an example. We ran this as a test on a school about 3 weeks ago, found out that they're using in their educators, they have a centrally deployed and certified video conferencing solution for their educators, found out that they have over 6 different softwares for video conferencing. Once again, going back to that conversation, a lot of educators hit a roadblock and aren't able to use that solution. So they just go download another one and ask the students to do it. That hasn't been screened by IT, that hasn't been screened by the administration, but maybe you want to take a look at it. You'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on with that. And kind of the last piece to talk through really quickly, and I won't spend a ton of time on here, is the classroom piece. So we've really tried to build a portfolio of products that will allow you to be successful. This will allow you to see, or your educators to see, students and whether they're on task and off task, give them control over pushing out links, They can manage tabs, make sure students are on the right screen, share screens. It really gives them the flexibility that they need with those devices in a remote setting to be successful in their schools. So you kind of see we covered 3 of the products. We do also have a MDM for those of you that are looking for an MDM for your remote devices. But the idea was really to build a core solution that gives you everything that you need at the time of purchase on the device to ensure that device is not only successful for the student, but for the educator and for you as the IT team. So with that, I'll wrap up my portion of the walkthrough. I know this was very high level. If any of you want to get into specific details, please do reach out to the Data Networks team. We'd be happy to set up a one-on-one conversation with you to ensure your success. But Dwayne, with that, I'll pass it over to you. And if you want to continue the conversation on your side, please, by all means.
Thanks, Brett, and that was awesome. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. And if you, like Brett said, if you do have any questions, you can reach out to me, myself, Dwayne McKenzie, or we do have Amy Bateman, who's our account executive, on the line as well. Amy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dwayne. This is Amy Bateman. I'm account executive focused on K through 12 public and private schools. So, again, we're here to support you if you have any questions, and I really appreciate Alicia giving us feedback on, what would be most important right now to schools, and content filter and internet security was really top of mind. So we thought that this would be helpful for you all. Alicia, I'm not sure if we're allowing question Q&A, if we put that into the chat box, if there was anything.
Yeah, no, people can actually just, unmute themselves and chime in and ask questions. It's a small enough group.
My name's Dan Berger. I'm IT director with a school down in DC. We're currently using another solution that graphics, and certainly the reporting and graphics don't look as robust. And can you break down the product and how much is included in the core product and how much are add-on fees? Like the one we're using right now, the classroom management is a separate product per se, or an add-on. And so can you kind of break down, and is it a set price? Is this the unit price, or is this based on enrollment, or how's this pricing scale established?
Yeah, Dan, great question. Thanks for that question. So there's 4 modules. There's the content filter, the MDM, the classroom, and the analytics, and they're all separate modules. Now, everything that we covered under each of those modules would be included with that individual module. When you do get into a bundle situation where you want to look at 2 or more of the products, there are additional discounts that are included by bundling those products. So to your question, Dan, it depends on the number of devices, how many products you're going to have, and Amy and Dwayne and the team can make sure that you guys have the correct, accurate pricing. So if you wanted to shoot over your numbers to them, I'd be more than happy to make sure they get the necessary pricing over to you quickly.
Thank you. And then you said it's based on number of devices. That's independent of platform, Chromebooks, Windows, Macs, whatever.
Exactly right. Yep, Dan, you're spot on. And we do it based on school-owned devices.
So if we want to deploy this to employees, that would be an additional count, obviously.
Correct. Yeah. Any device that within the school you would want to have protected, just make sure you include that in the count.
Yeah, like right now we don't do filtering on our employee devices, partly because the rollout would have, the complexity of doing that if you have to approve a YouTube video and the teacher can't find that YouTube video to request to be approved, it becomes kind of a complicated circle, catch-22.
Sure. Dan, if you end up going this direction, something I would suggest, because we can actually allow playlists, I have a lot of my schools actually setting up a playlist either for the curriculum team or for lead teachers or somebody that they want that playlist for. And it actually allows them to have the autonomy of amending the YouTube controls without having to involve IT.
That's interesting. One of the issues we had, one of the things that we were bumping into with YouTube is that YouTube, like you mentioned with the one music video, is that it's also the advertisements, the promotions for the upcoming videos, autoplay, and and the other things that come up, and so that's one of the things that we're trying to do is mask those things, and we like that our solution is able to do that. Does that also, like, I didn't see everything, so I don't know if, and because you were going really quickly, I don't know if does your version of YouTube, is it masking that the rest of the screen, the YouTube screen, and only showing the video, or is it what can you show what that experience looks like for the student on YouTube?
Brad, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, and I see that on the
Dwayne, thank
right hand side, everything's yeah, the promotions are masked. That's good.
Yep. Yeah, Dan, you're exactly right. And sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Dwayne, for pointing that out. But yeah, exactly like you said, the presentation for that student is going to be exactly like this. You'll see everything stripped.
Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. Now's your chance, MJ, Thomas, Waleed. Okay, so on that note, I am going to thank our presenters today, our Brett and Amy and Dwayne, for being on here today, and we will send out some information from these presenters about today's presentation. And I'd like to thank you all again for making time for being here. You'll also get the recording for this that you can share with other people. Have a great day today, friends, and I hope to see you at another event soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.